Friends, family, and those who are just curious. I had told Lynn I would do this short video about a week and a half ago, but then I realized that it meant I would probably have to bathe and shave, so I put it off. And then the weather in Colorado turned nice, so I could bike, and Lynn will always take an excuse that I was biking, so I went with that. I am, I think, the inaugural speaker in our Zoom video series that will soon to become legendary. What I want to talk about is really a paper that me and a couple of co-authors just released about a week ago. Here, I think I can get a screenshot of the paper. There's the paper. And then we'll go back to the beauty of Colorado, don't worry, on how to handle the COVID-19 pandemic and how it relates to utilities. This paper specifically talks about state regulators and how they would deal principally with their core regulated utilities, electricity and natural gas. We're doing a related paper that should be out. I just sent to my co-authors about an hour or two ago on the communications infrastructure. And that I'll talk a little bit about that later. This is only going to be a soupçon of law and economics of regulated or network industries during a pandemic. But let me tell you what my co-authors and I said in that paper and what we're going to say in the upcoming paper. My co-authors are noted IRLE alum Tony Clark, former FERC commissioner, and Matt Larson, who's another colleague of mine at Wilkinson Barker Knauer. The gist of what we said is that regulators need to think both short and long term about how they're going to handle the situation and the crisis that this pandemic brings. It brings, I think, two things from an economic perspective. One is a rather dramatic demand dip. And you've seen that around the world. I think Italy's number is around 10%. Talking around the industry in the US, people have seen either anywhere between 4 and 7% demand dips, specifically talking about the electricity side. And you see huge demand shifts, of course, which is your commercial and industrial demand has fallen off a cliff, and your residential demand has spiked as folks are being secure in place. What that means, I think, you can take a few lessons away. And one, I think the industry, broadly speaking, including communications, electricity, water, and gas, has behaved as responsible citizens. They've amended their disconnect policies. They are not people for non-payment. They're not dinging them. They are hooking people up in the broadband case so they can get connectivity and at special rates. All of those things are both the right thing to do and but are creating some long-term issues that have to be dealt with. And that's what our paper said, which is that the disconnect policies, the bad debt policies, the non-payment that's going to happen because of the economic distress from this are going to be real. And in the monopoly context, which is essentially distribution utilities as well as gas distribution companies, you have the regulatory means to socialize those losses. You can do it any number of ways. Most utilities in the country we've been tracking have already applied for some sort of accounting order or tracker to monitor and take on that bad debt either as a regulatory asset or as an asset that could be securitized or socialized in some way over a period of time. Again, in the short term, this is the right thing to do. Communications, by contrast, they are also not disconnecting people for non-payment, but because you don't have that regulated monopoly situation, it becomes much more difficult, in fact, impossible to socialize those losses short of a direct government payout, which at least isn't on the table yet, but stay tuned, I suppose. The and that's where we are, right? Which is we're going to securitize or amortize or do something in terms of a regulatory asset with regard to this bad debt and these non-payment, and then you need to figure out as a regulatory device how you take care of that going forward, over what period of day or months or years you amortize that. In some sense, this is a classic and probably beneficent evocation of Posner's taxation by regulation, which is we're using the utility to as a means of social policy. That's relatively easy to do in the monopoly context. Even competitive Texas, you'll notice, has done this, where they're using the distribution monopolies to back up the balance sheets of the uh, of the competitive providers, and that distribution utility is going to be authorized to take on, in essence, that bad debt and amortize it as a regulatory asset. I'm not sure if Texas has decided, but in all those cases, you've done the right thing. Now, the medium and the long term, this is where it gets interesting in the regulated environment, which is you cannot indefinitely use your distribution monopolies as a piggy bank to underwrite social uh, programs, and again, even beneficial social programs. Therefore, you have to decide as a regulator, when does this end, and how does this end? That is a prudential judgment that I think every state has to make. I think the second question is, what do you do when we come out the other side, where you are probably going to have some relatively significant revenue holes with from these regulated utilities? Their demand has dropped. Their demand has shifted. States with rate design that had implicitly created subsidy flows. Those subsidy flows are generally from commercial and industrial customers to residential customers. The question is, what do you do? And all those are, again, prudential judgments. The lessons we take away there are three things I think regulators need to think about, at least Tony, Matt, and I said, which is one, you've got to cover the fixed costs of this network. It's still the same network industry you saw before. And even with less use, the fixed costs are the fixed costs. And how do you plug those revenue holes? And it's more challenging in how do you plug those revenue holes when there's overall less economic activity and economic and money running around to plug them. One is an outright bailout. We libertarianish leaning folks in the IRLE universe blanch at that, but who knows, it could come to that. Two is you're going to have a new series of rate cases. Those rate cases are paradoxically going to ask for higher ROEs. And most important is, for the next time this happens, you need to make sure your rate design is right. You have to squeeze those implicit subsidies out. As we headed to a more distributed world, those subsidies are going to find it hard to survive in the first place. But if you had them, it's going to be more painful now than it would be otherwise. And realize solutions like decoupling and performance-based regulation, those opportunities may present themselves. Decoupling both gives you the right conservation incentives, and it covers the fixed cost of the network better. Um, Again, every state, every regulator, every legislature is going to have to decide this in their own way. But that's what's going to come out the other side of this pandemic. Communications is different. The states have very little jurisdiction remaining here. You have some governor's orders that purport to not allow disconnection of telephony and broadband Not clear what those would do legally under a challenge, but the FCC, I think, has stepped up, and voluntary pledges have been in place now and look to be extended. So jurisdictionally, the states don't have as much to do short of a bully pulpit. And they also don't have, because you don't have that traditional monopoly regulatory power, you don't have the means to socialize losses. Therefore, your need to come out the other side more quickly and return to something resembling normal order is all the greater. Um, that's kind of musing on our paper. We're going to have version 2, a sequel to the paper, since it's gotten such traction, talking specifically about what rate design might look like, what you do with ROEs, what you do with debt equity ratios, and how you maintain stability, which was the watchword of that paper, and is kind of what we're all seeking right now. I look forward to seeing you all sometime again in Aspen or elsewhere, or even on a Zoom happy hour. That seems to be working well. But that's my short version of our paper. I hope you found it interesting. My backyard is starting to bloom. I might do the next one of these from Breckenridge so you can get a mountain hint. Take care, and I hope that Lynn will be nice to me, that I finally shaved. I have not gotten a haircut, but I did put on a collared shirt for the first time in about a month and a half. So take care. See ya.